Good morning, Tailwind Tribe. This is Roger, and we are going to show you how to do the alignment adjustment on the wheels. And first off, one of the tribe's people had a problem with their trailer leaning, and one possibility might be that the shocks have leaked out oil and leaked out some pressure, and although it doesn't give much lift, it does give a little bit. So first thing you're going to want to do is, with it hooked up to the bike, I have it on a little toe panel to keep the tongue up and steady, is you want to push up and down several times. You see how it kind of came up slow? I can pull my hands away from it easily. If your shocks are bad, it will have a tendency of following your hands up and continue to bounce afterwards. That side is good. And then we'll do the same to this side. Bounce up and down a few times. It comes up slow. My hands pull away from it easily. And again, what will end up happening if they're bad is you go up and down, and as you pull up, it will come up with you, and at a certain point it will keep on doing this. But these shocks are good, so we'll pause the video here and we'll flip it upside down like a turtle, and then I'll show you how to do the alignment. Well, we are inside the shot because when we tried filming this outside, it was too windy and the noise of traffic was causing us problems with our high-tech top-dollar camera system. But anyways, we have it upside down and it's on its lid, and I'm going to show you exactly where the swing arm bolt is before we get started so that you know exactly what we're looking for when we get ready to align it. So I'm going to come in a little bit closer, and you can see the wheel, and then in between the wheel and the frame down here is the swing arm, and then the frame, the bottom of the body, and right between the frame and the bottom of the body you can see right there in the center of the frame, that is the bolt head. That's what we're going to be grabbing a hold of when we get ready to adjust the swing arm position. And then where the nut is this cross beam right here. The head of the bolt is right underneath this cross beam. And then if you look down inside here between the body and the edge of that cross beam, that's where the nut is. So we're going to be grabbing a hold of the nut and the head, and we're going to be loosening that up, and that is very tight. I think it's like 75 foot-pounds. So you're going to have to grunt like I did. Now I've already gone through and loosened it because I needed to take it out of alignment to show you. But we will get into the ins and outs of aligning it next. Talk to you soon. Alright, so we have the trailer on its lid right now. Lacey is standing by close because she's my supervisor to make sure I don't make too many mistakes. The tools that you're going to need is going to be a yardstick or just a stick, and I'll show you both ways of doing it. Possibly a roll of masking tape, a pencil, a pad of paper so you can write down your measurements. In the best case scenario, you'd want 2 3/4-inch wrenches. I have 1 3/4-inch wrench here. Then you're going to also want a 15/16 wrench for the leverage because the bolt is really tight. And in this case, I'm using an adjustable wrench to replace my 3/4-inch wrench. And you need to be careful with this because on one side it's metric and on the other side it's SAE. So make sure you use the SAE side, otherwise it just won't fit. Alright, so what we do to start with is we don't want to loosen anything up yet. We want to check the alignment because if it's good, we don't want to loosen it up to mess it up. So I'm going to show you how we mark the tires. In this case, we're using white paint. Normally I use a Sharpie, but white paint shows up on the camera much better. And the key thing here is that we're not going to you can measure to the paint, but what we do is we measure to a feature, and I'll show you why later. But when you're looking at the tire, there is a gap here and a gap here. and we're touching right here. So I don't want to use a feature that's here, because when you go to measure it, there'll be a gap and it's hard to get an accurate measurement. So I'm going to choose a feature that's near the center. The reason why I'm not measuring to the paint is because doing it this way, I can put the edge of the yardstick or the stick, whatever it is that you're using, up against that feature, and it gives me a positive feel to let me know that I am up against my reference. So at this point, we're going to go to the other side and take a measurement. So now we're going to take the same white mark and we're going to measure again. We're going to measure to the feature and not to the paint. And we are looking at 35 and 8, 9, 10, 11 sixteenths. 35 and 11 sixteenths. So write down 35 and 11 sixteenths of an inch back side. And I'm putting back side and front side so that we know which way it is, so we can know whether we are toed in or toed out. So at this point, I'm going to take our measuring stick, and because our reference point is this corner, we need to flip the stick around, and I'm going to set up the measurement or the reference here just like I did over there. And we are just leaving the yardstick or the measuring stick, whatever it is that you're using, resting on the frame. So I've come up against the positive reference I was using over here. And now we're going to spin the tire around so that we're using the same feature. And we are measuring 35 and 1/2 of an inch. So we are going to be 35 and 1/2 inch front side. So with being that we're 35 and 11 sixteenths of an inch on the back side and 35 and 1/2 of an inch on the front side, that is going to put us, if my math is right, 3/16 of an inch toe in. A toe in is what we want, but 3/16 is a bit excessive, and that will cause tire wear. So at this point, we'll go ahead and loosen up the swing arm bolts and start adjusting. Alright, so now we're going to go through how you do it in case you don't have a yardstick. And the way I'm going to emulate that is I'm just going to turn it over where there are no measurements to happen. At this point, what you'll need to do is to take your masking tape and take a piece off, and you're going to put it on the side that you're going to measure on. And the reason why that I suggest putting a piece of masking tape on here is if you're using a wood stick or whatnot, you can mark it right on the wood stick, but then what ends up happening is you take your measurement, you do adjustments, you take your measurement, and you're going to end up with a bunch of lines and you don't know what's what. So putting the masking tape on there will allow you to take a measurement, remove the masking tape, put a fresh piece of masking tape, and that way it's clear where all your markings are. So to start with, you're going to line it up on this edge just like you did with the yardstick. Put it up against that positive edge. You know you're good. Then you're going to go around to the other side and you're going to mark. There's the paint mark in that positive edge. I'm going to roll it around and I'm going to make a mark. Now it's sliding, but that's okay because I've already made the mark. I'm going to make a mark. And I'm going to put a B by that mark for backside. At this point, you're going to take your measuring stick, flip it around the same way that you did with the yardstick, Move your reference point to here. Get it up against the positive point. And now you're going to go over to this side and measure. And when I say measure, you're really not measuring right now. You're just creating marks. And then there's that mark. And it just so happens that it's right on. I'm going to put front side. So let's just hypothetically say that it turned out to be right here. At this point, you can take a tape measure and you can measure between your backside tick mark and your front side tick mark. Now at this point, we know that we would be toe in because the distance between the front side tick mark and your reference is shorter than your backside tick mark and your reference. At this point, you measure it, you write it down, and in this case it looks like 1/4 of an inch. I'm just guessing. Write down 1/4 of an inch toe in, loosen up your bolt for your swing arm, adjust it accordingly, take this piece of tape off, put a fresh piece of tape on there. Once you get the tire to where it moves in and out, snug it up to where it will move and it stays. So when you put it into position, it stays. Put it into position, it stays. At this point, with the fresh tape, you'll go through the process all over again. Remeasure, measure the distance between the gaps, between your marks, and you're shooting for a 32nd of an inch. I'm going to have to readjust this a little bit because we are a little bit too close to being towed out for my taste, so I'm going to adjust it ever so slightly. One thing that you might have to do, and with Tom, we've noticed that we've had to do this as well. Sometimes, if you're borderline, if you don't have enough slack in these to take the measurement, what you can do is you can get a piece of wood and you can slide that piece of wood in here. That's if you need to go more towards toe in. If you need to go more towards, if you need to bring the backs of the tires in to get it right, you can take a strap and put it around there and pull it in. The only problem with that is you can't spin the tires easily. But if you put a wedge, tighten it up, take the wedge out, then measure, you can still spin the tires. It may go easy for you. You may have to get a little bit creative, but this is the basic gist of it. This is what you're looking for. A little bit towed in, a little bit closer at the front, 32nd to 16th of an inch, and that's it. Alright, so I guess I should bring up the point that I didn't bring up yet, is what is the difference between toe in and toe out, in case you don't know. If the backs of the tires are closer together than the fronts of the tires, that is considered a toe out situation, which we do not want. If the fronts of the tires are closer together than the backs of the tires, that is what we want, but just ever so slightly, but we always want it to be towed in. Whenever we want a toe out situation. So we have come up where we are toe in 3/16 of an inch, and we want anywhere between 1/32 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the wrenches on here and I'm going to loosen it up and show you what to look for and how to adjust it. So I like to stick my hand in underneath the frame here and get the wrench. That way I'm supporting it. It's a little bit easier because I don't have to be as strong. And now that the wrench is in place, I'm going to take the 3/4 inch wrench and put it onto the nut that's on the other side. And this happens to be a ratchet wrench, which works out pretty well. But one of the problems with the way this is set up is because it's so tight, you don't have room for a socket and a breaker bar. And because of that, and because it's so tight, unless you're Schwarzenegger, you may not be able to loosen it up with this wrench, hence the little bit larger of a wrench. If you take the box end wrench and stick it over the open end wrench, and you know you have it right because it will be almost in line and you can pull on it. If you get it wrong and you happen to put it on like this and you go to pull on it, it's just going to come off. So you put it around the open end wrench like this, and at this point I'm going to hold that wrench and I'm going to pull this one to loosen it. Now obviously you can see it's much easier because I've already loosened it. Now believe me, I had to grunt, moan, and groan to get it to loosen up because it was that tight. At this point, what you'll notice is the wheel is loose and I can swing it in and out. So the way that it was like this, and it was 3/16 of an inch closer at the front. So what we want to do is to bring it in this way some. So what you notice is if you push it in, it may come out. It may not stay the way that you're wanting it to. So what I like to do is I'll take the wrench and I'll put it on there, and I'll use my leg to hold the tire and move it. Use my knee, and you can see it moving back and forth, and I'll snug this up to where it just stops moving back and forth, but I can still move it. It's a little bit awkward because the trailer wants to spin. So we'll see if that works. At this point you can test it by pushing it in, pulling it out, and now it's staying pretty well. And at this point it's going to be wash, rinse, and repeat. You're going to measure the backside, and I'm spinning the tire looking for my marks. Which white, obviously, on a black tire is going to be easier to see than a black Sharpie, but a Sharpie does work. Okay, I got that side lined up. Bring this around and measure, and that's going to be 35 1/2. So 35 1/2 inches backside. Now you may say that, well, it was 35 11/16 and it may have moved too much, but before you make a change, go ahead and measure the front side, because the pivot for the swing arm is right here, and the further away you get from that pivot, the more of a change it's going to make. So the back side of the tire is going to make a big change. The front side of the tire, being so close to the pivot, is going to make a little change. So if you think you moved it too far, don't jump the gun and readjust it. Go ahead and check the front side and see how far out you're actually going to be. So I'm going to line this up using that positive reference near the paint, just like I did on the other side. And then we'll go over here and measure this side. And now we are looking at just a smidgen under 35 3/4. I'm sorry, 35 1/2. Lacey, where were you there? So now the front side is going to be, and I'll write this as 35 1/2 minus. Front side. Now my handwriting is terrible. So the original measurements that we took was 35 and 11/16 on the back side, 35 and a half on the front side, giving us about a 3/16 of an inch toe in. We loosened up the swing arm bolt. We moved it, we snugged up the swing arm bolt to where we can move it and it stays. And now we're at 35 and a half inch backside and 35 and a half inch minus a smidge front side. So in effect, now we are minus a smidge toe in, which is right what we're looking for. So a 32nd of an inch to a 16th of an inch. I call 32nd of an inch a smidge. So at this point, get your measuring stick out of the way. Get your wrench on here. Hold the backup wrench and start tightening it up. And I'll use just the wrench until I get to where it's hard, and then I'll use my cheater wrench again. This time I'll put it on the other side and I'll start cranking on it. Ooh, that's a pretty sound. So at this point, because you can't get a socket in here and therefore you can't get a torque wrench, and I don't have one of those torque wrenches that you can put a long wrench on, 75 foot-pounds, that's German torque, good and taut. And I gotta grab a hold of this wrench on the inside a little bit firmer. So at this point, just to make sure that nothing is moved, you'll go through that process again. Measure the distance at the back, write that number down. Measure the distance at the front, write the number down. Make sure that you're still a little bit towed in. At that point, you're done. So some of you may have been pretty observant and noticed that there's no license plate on this trailer. That's a story to be told with a couple of beers because it is kind of funny. But anyways, at this point, roll your trailer back over onto its wheels and happy trailering.